They stole his future for her business. Reddit family drama story. Have you ever felt like a guest in your own family? Today's story from Silent Wars dives into one of the most heartbreaking Reddit family drama stories, where a young man graduates college, only to be met with silence while his sister is showered with praise. If you've ever felt overlooked or unappreciated, this story will hit home. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Silent Wars for more powerful stories like this. Ethan was 22 years old when he crossed the stage and received his college diploma, the first in his family to do so without student loans. He had worked tirelessly juggling part-time jobs, summer classes, sleepless nights, and early mornings to get to this moment. It wasn't about prestige or praise. He didn't expect a parade or a sky full of fireworks. But deep down, like any child stepping into adulthood, he hoped the people who raised him would be there, smiling, clapping, maybe even tearing up with pride. Instead, when he looked into the crowd, there was no familiar face, no wave, no camera held up by his mom. Just empty seats where his family should have been. At first, Ethan told himself there had to be a reason. Traffic, a forgotten parking pass, something. But when he got back to his apartment, checked his phone, and found only a single text from his mom. "We're proud of you." He felt a strange ache settle in his chest. It was a message so hollow, so casual, that it felt like a birthday reminder sent by an app. No call, no hug, no presents. Just a smiley face, and the absence of everything that mattered. Still holding on to hope, he went home that evening, thinking maybe they were saving the celebration for dinner. But when he walked through the door, all he found was a lukewarm pepperoni pizza on the counter. No decorations, no card, not even a can of soda. His sister Haley barely looked up from her phone. His dad didn't pause the game on TV. And his mom? She smiled awkwardly and said, "We got your favorite." Then, as if trying to make it festive, she grabbed a ketchup bottle and wrote "Congrats" on a paper plate. That moment broke something in Ethan, not with a bang, but with a quiet crack. All the years he spent hoping, proving, sacrificing. And this was it. A pizza and a condiment scribble. He sat down, took a slice, and forced a smile. Then he pulled out his phone, snapped a photo of the sad little plate, and posted it with a caption that said it all. "Dream big, kids." Not one of them noticed. They never really did. 2 years earlier, Ethan stood under the summer sun stringing fairy lights in his parents' backyard. His shirt stuck to his back with sweat as he arranged cupcakes, fluffed up tablecloths, and helped the DJ haul in speakers. His little sister Haley had just graduated high school, and the family had gone all out renting a tent, hiring a local Italian restaurant to cater trays of lasagna and chicken parmesan, even setting up a photo booth with props and a "Congrats, Haley" banner that stretched the width of the house. Neighbors dropped in, extended relatives mingled over champagne, and his mom called it the celebration our baby girl deserves. Ethan smiled through it all. He was proud of her. He thought surely, when it was his turn, they'd remember the way he showed up for her. But when Ethan's own graduation arrived, the scene couldn't have been more different. There were no lights to hang. No music. No laughter wafting in from the yard. Just silence. No banner. No cupcakes. Not even a handmade sign. Just a single pizza box, lukewarm pepperoni on the kitchen counter, and a squiggle of ketchup spelling out "Congrats" on a paper plate like it was some kind of joke. Haley barely glanced up from her phone, and when Ethan asked about the lack of celebration, she rolled her eyes and said, "You're being dramatic." The contrast didn't just sting, it hollowed something out of him. This wasn't about the party. It was what the party had symbolized: effort, excitement, pride. Haley's graduation was treated like a milestone worthy of a spotlight. His, despite being the bigger achievement, the first in the family to finish college, and debt-free at that, was handled like an afterthought. It wasn't a matter of money, it was a matter of meaning. Ethan sat with that comparison quietly, as he had so many others throughout his life. Haley was always the one with the bigger reactions, the louder applause, the extra attention. He had always told himself it didn't matter that maybe his parents just didn't show love the same way. But now, sitting in that kitchen with a cold slice of pizza and a ketchup plate for company, he couldn't lie to himself anymore. The truth was there, clear as day in his own family. He was the shadow. And shadows don't get parties. Ethan didn't plan to make a statement. He wasn't trying to spark drama or stir up sympathy. He just wanted to capture the truth of a moment that felt too surreal to keep to himself. So he pulled out his phone, turned the camera on himself, and snapped a picture. In the frame, a cold slice of pepperoni pizza, a lonely plate with the word "congrats" scribbled in ketchup, and his own half-hearted smile, the kind you give when you're trying not to cry in front of people who won't notice either way. He uploaded it to his Instagram story with a simple caption, "Dream big, kids." And then he set the phone down. No filter, no emojis, just facts. It wasn't a cry for help. It was a quiet act of defiance. A subtle, deeply personal rebellion. He didn't rage. He didn't shout. He didn't confront his parents or call out his sister. He didn't throw a fit or slam the door. He simply shared what was real, knowing that anyone who really looked would understand. That story wasn't just a photo. It was a snapshot of years of being the afterthought, of giving more than he got, of showing up when it mattered, only to be left standing in the margins. What stung most wasn't the pizza, or the lack of celebration, it was that nobody even noticed the post. His parents kept watching TV. His sister kept scrolling through her feed. No one asked why he'd stepped out. No one thought to check. The rebellion, if you could call it that, went unseen by the very people it was meant for. And that, in a way, made it all the more powerful. Ethan wasn't looking to shame them. He wasn't even trying to make them feel bad. He just needed to document the moment for himself more than anyone. A reminder. A timestamp. Proof that this wasn't in his head. That the neglect was real. That the disappointment had weight. That his silence wasn't acceptance. It was exhaustion. In that single snapshot, Ethan said everything he hadn't been able to say out loud. I see what this is. I see where I stand. And I'm done pretending it's okay. It was the first time he let the world in on the truth, and even if his family missed it, he didn't. He finally saw himself. Ethan didn't slam the door or storm out. He didn't leave a note or demand to be followed. He just walked out of the house and kept driving, past the familiar turns of his neighborhood, past the gas station where he used to bike for slushies, until he pulled into the lot of a Marriott off the interstate. It was quiet, forgettable, anonymous, and that was exactly what he needed. Using the emergency credit card his grandparents had given him just in case, he booked a room. No plans, no explanations, just space. The kind of space where the air didn't feel heavy with disappointment. He sat on the edge of the stiff bed, looking at the generic artwork above the desk, and realized this wasn't a tantrum. It wasn't a dramatic moment. It was survival, an act of emotional self-preservation. Because what he was mourning wasn't just the pizza or the missed celebration. He was mourning the illusion, the dream of a family who saw him, cheered for him, valued him. The one he'd carried quietly in his chest since childhood. In that sterile hotel room, with the hum of the air conditioner and the buzz of his muted phone, Ethan let go of something he didn't even know he was still holding hope. The hope that if he just tried a little harder, gave a little more, made himself a little smaller or quieter or more agreeable, they'd finally notice, finally appreciate, finally love him the way he deserved to be loved. He didn't cry. There were no fireworks, no breakdowns, just stillness. a kind of emotional numbness that felt more honest than anything he'd felt in years. He ordered lukewarm takeout, watched reruns of old sitcoms, and slept with the curtains half open, the parking lot light spilling in. In that dim glow, he wasn't a disappointment, a second priority, or the forgotten child. He was just a person who had finally stepped out of a role he never asked to play. Ethan wasn't running away. He was shedding the weight of expectations that were never his to carry. And for the first time in a long time, he wasn't chasing their approval. He was reclaiming his peace, even if it started from the scratchy sheets of a budget hotel. As Ethan sat alone in the dim stillness of his hotel room, letting his phone buzz itself into silence, he had no idea that back home, his family was already moving on without him. It wasn't a day later when the truth hit him like a sucker punch. While he was processing the quiet heartbreak of being overlooked on one of the most important days of his life, his family was clinking wine glasses at a vineyard with Haley. There they were, Mom, Dad, and his golden child sister dressed in coordinated pastels, posing with cheese boards and laughing over glasses of rosé. The Instagram caption? Haley's summer kickoff. So proud of our sunshine girl. The cruelty wasn't just in the timing, it was in the message. Haley's seasonal plans warranted a vineyard day and curated photo shoots, while Ethan's years of grinding through college went unnoticed, underappreciated, and unrewarded. His absence at the family gathering wasn't met with worry or concern, but with complete disregard. No one paused to ask where he was. No one acknowledged what had just been missed. The joy they felt with Haley wasn't dimmed by Ethan's pain, it was prioritized over it. Ethan stared at the photos in disbelief. A vineyard. A full-blown celebration. Just days after his graduation had been reduced to a pizza and a ketchup plate. It was almost theatrical in its indifference. Not only had he been forgotten, but they were publicly celebrating the very person who had stolen the spotlight every step of the way. It wasn't new. Haley had always been good at absorbing attention like sunlight. But this time, it wasn't her fault alone. His parents had enabled it, encouraged it. Even after Ethan's quiet disappearance, they never once checked in before moving on to their next glittering excuse to ignore him. That moment, that photo, that caption, it changed something. Ethan wasn't just hurt. He was gutted. It was proof that he could vanish completely, and they'd never stop to look back. Their world kept spinning, as long as Haley was smiling for the camera. And for the first time, Ethan stopped hoping they'd ever notice what they were doing. He finally understood. His pain was background noise to them. Haley's happiness would always matter more. This wasn't just a slight. It was betrayal, served with wine and hashtags. And Ethan realized then he wasn't just stepping away from a family gathering. He was stepping out of their orbit for good. Ethan thought he had already reached the bottom of the emotional well, but the deepest cut hadn't even come yet. A few weeks after graduation, he returned home quietly during a workday, when he knew the house would be empty. His plan was simple: pack the few things he owned and disappear without confrontation. But life had one final truth to unveil. While collecting old clothes and boxed textbooks from his childhood room, Ethan opened a drawer in the kitchen, one his mother had always kept locked. Out of a mixture of curiosity and habit, he reached for the taped key hidden beneath the junk drawer. It had been there since he was 10. What he found would leave him breathless. Inside the drawer were financial documents, banking records, old tax forms, and something that made his blood run cold. A statement from a college fund in his name, closed 3 years ago. The balance before it was emptied? Tens of thousands of dollars. More than enough to have spared Ethan from years of juggling part-time jobs and sleepless nights. His name was on the original account, but the final transfer had been authorized by H. Dawson, his sister Haley. The money hadn't just vanished. It had been funneled into a new account, one labeled Small Business Startup. Ethan's jaw clenched as the reality set in. His parents had helped Haley start her handcrafted jewelry business with his college savings. The same parents who told him, "We just can't afford to help you right now," had silently redirected his future into Haley's Etsy dream. And they never told him. Not once. This wasn't forgetfulness. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a choice, a calculated, intentional betrayal. His years of sacrifice had been built on a lie, while Haley was building bead bracelets with the very resources that should have paid for his education. The pepperoni pizza and ketchup congrats weren't just lazy parenting, they were the final insult on top of years of deceit. Ethan didn't cry. He didn't yell. He simply took out his phone and snapped photos of the documents, one by one receipts of betrayal he would never let them twist. The house no longer felt like home. It felt like a stage, where he had played the responsible son while the script had been written to erase him all along. That day, Ethan didn't just pack boxes, he packed away illusions. He wasn't just leaving a house. He was leaving behind the last thread of trust he had in the people who were supposed to protect his future. Ethan had spent most of his life being the quiet one, the agreeable son, the steady sibling who never caused waves. But after discovering that his college fund had been secretly siphoned into Haley's jewelry business with full knowledge and support from their parents, something changed. Silence was no longer safety. It was complicity. And for the first time in his life, Ethan chose to speak not with rage or revenge, but with facts. He spent an entire night piecing everything together. Screenshots of financial transfers, bank statements, the name on the account closure form, archived emails where his mother had claimed, "There's just not enough money right now." He even found public registration records proving that Haley's LLC was filed under their father's name. It wasn't just a sister's startup. It was a family-funded operation built quietly on Ethan's stolen foundation. With trembling hands but a calm mind, he opened his laptop and wrote an email. The subject line was as cold as it was final. "Why I'm not coming to Haley's birthday." There was no flowery language, no personal attacks, no dramatic storytelling. Just truth. The message was short. "For years I believed the problem was me, that I wasn't enough, didn't do enough, didn't matter enough. I see now that the issue was never about what I lacked, but about who you chose to support. Attached is everything you need to understand my decision. I will not be attending Haley's birthday. I will not be participating in this version of family any longer." Then he hit send to his parents, his sister, and a few key aunts and uncles who had always blindly praised Haley's every move. He didn't wait for a response. He didn't even reread the message. Ethan closed the laptop, took a breath, and for the first time in years felt the weight on his chest begin to lift. The fallout came fast. While Ethan stayed offline, his best friend kept tabs on the family's group chats. The threads imploded. Some relatives expressed shock. Some went silent. Haley posted cryptic social media stories about haters and toxic energy. But the damage was done. Ethan didn't post for attention, he posted for closure. And it worked. Because sometimes the loudest thing you can say is the truth, told plainly, without apology. The silence after Ethan's email didn't last long, it exploded. Within hours, his phone lit up with a barrage of voicemails from his mother, each one more frantic than the last. They began with feigned concern. "Ethan, we're worried. Please call us." But by the third message, the tone had shifted. His father's voice now carried a sharp edge. "You blindsided us. You twisted everything. This was a family decision." Haley, ever the master of public image, took to social media in cryptic style. She posted an Instagram story showing her twirling in her birthday dress, captioned, "Some people can't stand when others shine. Haters gonna hate." Still glowing. But despite the glitter and filters, something was off. The photos from her party revealed a room only half filled. The usually packed crowd of friends and cousins seemed sparse. A few chairs were empty, a few smiles strained. One cousin, who had always been polite but distant, commented under the post, "Wish you'd told us what was going on sooner." Another wrote Ethan privately, "We got your email." That was hard to read. "I'm sorry, man. Truly." The most unexpected message, though, came from Aunt Valerie, one of his mom's older sisters, a woman who usually stayed on the sidelines. Her text was simple. "You didn't deserve that. I'm so sorry." It stopped Ethan in his tracks. He read it twice. No excuses. No, "But she's your sister." Just an honest acknowledgement of pain that had long gone unspoken. And yet, even with the cracks forming, the core of the family remained in denial. His mother posted on Facebook the next morning, "Family isn't about money or mistakes. It's about forgiveness." As if forgiveness was owed without confession. As if what Ethan had uncovered was just an emotional hiccup, not a calculated betrayal. The party ended. The cupcakes were thrown out. The DJ packed up early. But Ethan's message still hung in the air, lingering in inboxes and unsettled group chats. The Golden Girls' glow seemed dimmer under the weight of truth. And for the first time, Ethan wasn't the one left questioning himself. They were. He didn't gloat. He didn't respond. He simply sat in the quiet, knowing he had finally said what needed to be said. And slowly, the silence that used to sting started to feel like peace. Ethan didn't slam the door. He didn't stage a dramatic farewell or leave a bitter voicemail. He simply accepted a job offer in Chicago, packed his life into a few suitcases, and slipped away without a goodbye. The choice wasn't made in anger, it was born out of exhaustion, clarity, and quiet resolve. There had been no apologies, no genuine attempts to make things right. And at 22 years old, Ethan finally realized he didn't have to keep waiting for the family he'd always hoped would show up. That dream had expired the moment they used his future to fund his sister's Etsy store and handed him a pizza box as a reward for 4 years of sacrifice. The car ride out of town wasn't heavy with grief. There were no tears clouding his vision. The road was long, flat, and open, exactly what he needed. Every mile that passed felt like shedding a layer of the past, the guilt, the expectations, the quiet heartbreak of always being second best. In their place came something rare, peace. When he crossed the state line, he didn't look back. No photos. No final glance at the skyline of his childhood. That life was behind him now. In its place was a new beginning in Chicago, an apartment with creaky floors and windows that rattled in the wind, but it was his. The freedom of decorating his own space, choosing what went on the walls, cooking what he liked without judgment, it all felt radical after years of living on someone else's terms. The job was solid, a marketing role with a mid-size firm that appreciated what he brought to the table. For the first time, Ethan wasn't someone's shadow. He wasn't Haley's older brother, or the kid who never needed anything. He was just Ethan, hardworking, sharp, and finally being seen for who he was, not who he wasn't. And perhaps the most profound change was internal. He no longer felt the need to prove his worth to people who were never going to value it. He didn't crave their approval. He didn't need their explanations. He just needed distance miles of it. That first night in Chicago, he stood by the window, listening to the hum of the L train in the distance. No family noise, no guilt, just the city's heartbeat and his own. And in that stillness, Ethan did something he hadn't done in years. He exhaled fully, freely, finally. In Chicago, Ethan didn't just escape the weight of his past, he began building something entirely new, something real. He wasn't running anymore. He was rooting himself in honesty. For the first time, his life wasn't defined by who ignored him, overlooked him, or drained him. It was shaped by quiet mornings, genuine friendships, and spaces where he no longer had to shrink to fit in. The creaky third-floor walk-up he rented may not have been glamorous, but it was his. It smelled of old wood, city air, and possibility. Every corner held potential. Every cup of coffee brewed in his tiny kitchen reminded him that peace didn't come from being accepted by the wrong people, it came from choosing yourself. At work, he quickly earned respect. No more walking on eggshells, no more apologizing for taking up space. His ideas were heard, his efforts acknowledged. One of his supervisors even said, "You've got initiative," and that quiet confidence, rare combo. It startled Ethan at first. He wasn't used to being complimented without a catch. Slowly, he started to believe it. His co-workers didn't know the Ethan who grew up in the shadow of his sister's spotlight. They only knew the Ethan who showed up, met deadlines, and cracked dry jokes during lunch breaks. But perhaps the most unexpected change came in the form of Alyssa. She was gentle-voiced and thoughtful, with a curious spark in her eyes. She didn't press when he hesitated. She didn't flinch when he talked about the estrangement. She listened not to fix, not to judge, just to understand. It wasn't a whirlwind romance, and that's what made it feel safe. He didn't have to prove anything to her. She saw him not the version edited for family approval, but the real, tired, healing Ethan. As months passed, the scar tissue of the past didn't disappear, but it stopped bleeding. Chicago gave him room to grow, not in spite of the pain, but because of what he'd learned from it. He learned that love, real love, whether romantic or platonic, doesn't come with strings or conditions. It shows up. It listens. It remembers. Ethan still had his quiet moments, reflections of what was lost, but now, those thoughts didn't define him. They reminded him how far he'd come. Because in a city of strangers, he finally found something his old life never gave him. A sense of belonging built not on performance, but on truth. Several months had passed since Ethan walked away from the wreckage of his family dynamic and began a new life in Chicago. He had no intention of looking back. The silence from his parents and sister had been eerily consistent, and in many ways, a relief. But one chilly afternoon in early spring, a cream-colored envelope arrived in his mailbox. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable. It was his father's, stiff and slanted, as if even the letters carried tension. Ethan paused for a long moment before opening it, unsure if he wanted to invite the past into his present. Inside was a neatly typed letter on formal stationery, not handwritten, not warm, not apologetic, just cold, calculated lines filled with carefully worded guilt. "Your mother and I hope you've had time to reflect," it began, setting the tone for what followed. The letter went on to say how much they missed having him around, how family isn't perfect, and how, perhaps in time, you'll understand the decisions we made. They even included a note about Haley's upcoming wedding, suggesting that he'd be welcome if he chose to attend, as if nothing had happened, as if an invitation would fix everything. Not a single word of apology. Not once did they say, "We're sorry." Not for the forgotten graduation, not for the stolen college fund, not for the years of being overlooked. Instead, the letter leaned on expectation, implying that forgiveness was his responsibility. Ethan read it once, then again, slower this time, not because he was swayed, but because he wanted to be certain. He wanted to be sure he wasn't overreacting, that he wasn't misreading the subtext. But no, the message was clear. His father hadn't written a letter to reconnect. He'd written one to reel him back in, using guilt as bait. Ethan let out a quiet laugh. Not bitter, not angry, just tired. It was astonishing how predictable they still were, even from miles away. He folded the letter, placed it back into the envelope, and slid it into the back of his drawer. Not out of sentiment, but as a reminder. A reminder of why he left. Some people send letters to mend, Others send them to manipulate. He didn't call. He didn't write back. He didn't even RSVP. Because when apologies come wrapped in expectations, they're not apologies at all. They're just another form of control, one Ethan no longer answered to. When the formal wedding invitation for Haley's big day arrived, complete with gold-foiled script and a return RSVP card, Ethan didn't feel anger. He didn't feel regret. What he felt, strangely, was nothing at all. There was no handwritten note, no acknowledgement of the nearly 2 years of silence between them, just a sterile invite that presumed he would show up, smile for pictures, and pretend the past hadn't left scars. Instead of checking a box, Ethan picked up the phone and dialed someone he hadn't spoken to in months: his grandmother. She answered on the second ring, breath catching in her throat the moment she heard his voice. "Ethan?" she said, her voice trembling. "I've been praying you'd call." And in that moment, for the first time in a long time, he felt seen, not as the spare son, not as the overlooked sibling, but simply as Ethan. They talked for nearly an hour. She told him she'd only heard bits and pieces, but she always sensed something was off. "You weren't the quiet one," she told him gently. "You were the anchor. They leaned on you too hard and never once thanked you for carrying their weight." Ethan's throat tightened. Of all people, she was the one who had noticed the things he never said out loud. Then, almost impulsively, he asked, "Would you want to come visit me in Chicago sometime?" Her laugh was immediate and full of warmth. "You don't even have to ask. I'd love that." So instead of sitting stiffly in a pew while Haley floated down the aisle in a custom gown, Ethan spent the weekend walking hand in hand with his grandmother through the streets of downtown Chicago. They visited the Art Institute, took selfies at the Bean, and ate deep dish pizza on a park bench while pigeons circled their feet. That night, bundled up in matching scarves and sipping hot cocoa from a local cafe, they watched the city lights flicker and shared stories that had never surfaced before. Ethan posted a single photo online, just the two of them, smiling beneath the soft glow of a lamppost. The caption read simply, "Found the family that shows up." It got one like from Haley's old college roommate. Whether intentional or accidental, Ethan didn't care. Because that weekend, he wasn't mourning a family that never valued him. He was building something new, something honest, something his grandmother had always known he deserved. As the seasons shifted in Chicago from the bright greens of summer to the crisp golds of fall, Ethan began to realize something that startled him in its simplicity. He didn't actually miss his family. Not really. What he had missed all along was the hope, the quiet, aching hope that one day they would see him. That they'd pause, look past the convenience of his reliability and the silence he wrapped around himself like armor, and actually recognize who he was. A son who showed up, a brother who sacrificed, a young man who carried more than anyone knew. But that day never came. And it no longer needed to. Ethan had graduated twice. Once from college, cap and gown under harsh stadium lights, and once from something far less ceremonial, but infinitely more meaningful, from the constant hunger for approval. From the belief that love had to be earned through deeds, silence, and smiling through neglect. That second graduation, though invisible to the world, felt far more real. It was not marked by applause, but by peace. A peace that arrived in quiet, steady waves, the kind you don't notice until you realize your chest doesn't feel heavy anymore. He was no longer the backup plan, no longer the just-in-case sibling, no longer the one who paid the bills in the shadows while others took the credit in the spotlight. Now he was simply Ethan. Not defined by what he wasn't to them, but by what he had become to himself. A man who cooked Sunday breakfasts for no one but himself. Who read poetry on park benches without explaining why. Who picked out birthday cards for new friends that made him laugh. Not out of obligation, but out of genuine affection. a man who gave up on being chosen and instead chose himself. On the 1-year anniversary of his college graduation, Ethan walked down to the lakefront, journal in hand. He didn't bring a cake or take a selfie. He just sat with the wind brushing against his skin, watching the ripples stretch into the distance. He whispered to no one in particular, "You made it." Then he smiled, not the kind he used to force at family dinners, but one that bloomed quietly, fully, and without hesitation. Because in the end, Ethan's greatest milestone wasn't a degree. It was the moment he realized he didn't need their celebration to validate his worth. He was always enough, he just needed the space to believe it. One of the most profound lessons from Ethan's journey is this: true peace often begins when we stop begging to be seen by those who choose not to look. Many of us, especially in our later years, carry unspoken wounds from being overlooked by family, by society, or even by ourselves. We spend years trying to earn love through quiet sacrifice, hoping that one day the people we've supported will acknowledge our worth. But sometimes, recognition never comes. And that's when a deeper truth emerges. Your value doesn't come from applause or validation, it comes from within. Ethan's quiet rebellion, his decision to walk away from those who dismissed him, and his courage to build a life grounded in honesty and self-worth remind us that it is never too late to choose ourselves. For older adults, this story offers a gentle yet powerful message. You don't have to carry the burden of unmet expectations. You're allowed to start fresh, to redefine family, and to create joy that isn't dependent on the approval of others. Life isn't measured by the parties thrown for us or the gifts we receive. It's measured by the peace we feel when we live in truth. If you've ever felt like the afterthought, know this: your story still matters, your voice is still strong, and your next chapter can be the most freeing of all. Sometimes, the most sacred act of love is giving yourself the celebration no one else ever did. Thank you so much for watching this emotional journey with us. Ethan's story reminds us that sometimes choosing peace means walking away even from family. If this story resonated with you, please like the video and subscribe to Silent Wars for more real, powerful stories every week.